distinguished delegates, the meeting is called to order. We shall pursue our deliberations under agenda item 2B, theme topic, Building Back Better from Crises through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific, Sub-Regional Perspectives. The main document pertaining to this agenda item is ESCAP/77/3 on sub-regional cooperation to build back better from crises in Asia and the Pacific. The Commission's consideration of this agenda item will be facilitated by a virtual dialogue with sub-regional organizations from across the region. I will then open the floor for brief country interventions. It is now my pleasure to invite the Executive Secretary, Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Jabana, to deliver her opening remarks to set the scene for the dialogue.
Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, distinguished delegates, it is my pleasure to have this sub-regional dialogue on building back better from crisis through regional cooperation with the participation of 8 sub-regional organizations from around Asia and the Pacific. Over the past year, we have gone through an unprecedented socio-economic crisis. No country and no one has been spared. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly underscored the significance of our approach towards inclusive and network multilateralism. You may have seen that there have been several attempts to focus on unilateral and national policy-driven announcements and measures in these challenging times. Yet, the spirit of goodwill prevailed and solidarity remained at the core of our responses. The scale and urgency of the pandemic reaffirmed the importance and relevance of regional and sub-regional cooperation, more so for countries in geographical proximity to each other. I must highlight the solution-oriented plans and strategies of several regional and sub-regional mechanisms, such as the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, the PIF's Pacific Humanitarian Pathway on COVID-19, the SAARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund, Central Asia's Guidelines on Cross-Border and Transit Traffic Facilitation Measures, and the Northeast Asia Cooperation Initiative for Infectious Disease Control and Public Health to mitigate and address the health and socio-economic impacts. As we gradually move towards a post-COVID-19 recovery, we must reinvigorate multilateralism to build back better. Please allow me to reiterate that I have witnessed the way your organizations have brought together a common understanding to find new pathways for a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asian Pacific in the era of COVID-19 pandemic. I commend your leadership. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, as we harness regional and sub-regional cooperation, multilateralism has gained momentum. Simply put, we need to utilize all our platforms to work together more closely and effectively and in a timely manner. I'm convinced that this is the time to fully put multilateralism into practice. At the global level, we have seen the benefits of multilateralism. COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access, or COVAX, which has brought multiple organizations and networks working together to efficiently mobilize global-level coordination. The COVAX facility, as the vaccine procurement platform, also contributes to managing the vaccine as a global public good. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, as you begin your dialogue today, may I suggest some ways to building back better from crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. The first priority is to commit to social protection as a wise investment. We must focus on investing in social protection systems to act as automatic stabilizers, stimulating aggregate demand, and thereby helping to steady economies. The newly adopted action plan to strengthen regional cooperation on social protection in Asia and the Pacific through ESCAP platform provides governments in the region with a shared vision and strategy for promoting partnership, peer learning, and the sharing of good practices, as well as for identifying needs for technical assistance. A second priority is to align financial and economic stimulus with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This is an opportune moment to work together to significantly reduce the constraints of fiscal resources within a country and among countries. Regional and sub-regional approaches could support the mobilization of multilateral resources, provide debt relief, and prevent defaults that lead to prolonged financial and economic downturns. Third is to build resilient supply chain and increase cross-border connectivity. It is heartening to know that coordinated sub-regional and regional approaches have been effective in facilitating trade and transport in these challenging times. In this regard, ESCAP has several initiatives that advance and support this principle, most notably the Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Cross-Border Paperless Trade in Asia and Pacific, the Intergovernmental Transport Agreements on the Asian Highway Network, on the Trans-Asian Railway Network, and on dry ports, and the Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway Initiative to improve information connectivity, internet traffic and network management, e-resilience, and affordable broadband access for all. Finally, we need to restore the broken relationship between people and nature. The Asia-Pacific region is uniquely positioned to offer long-lasting solutions to the climate change crisis. Regional and sub-regional cooperation frameworks are key instruments in ensuring conservation policies that focus on large-scale, integrated restoration of degraded ecosystems, enhanced management of protected areas to increase resilience to natural and health disasters, and on transboundary conservation, including biodiversity corridors. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I am committed more than ever to leverage the expertise and capabilities of regional and sub-regional organizations in identifying areas of common interest and mobilizing collective actions to promote inclusive and network multilateralism in our region. ESCAP, along with the broader United Nations system, stands ready to facilitate the exchange of experiences and knowledge sharing among sub-regions and ensure that the benefits from the programs of your respective organization provide recommendation for building back better in Asia and Pacific. I look forward to listening to your recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. May I now invite the conference room officer to play a short video about ESCAP's engagement with sub-regional organizations.
The diversity of Asia and the Pacific is what makes the region such a rich place, spanning from the blue oceans of the Pacific to the Caucasus Mountains on the doorstep of Europe. That variety also brings different development challenges. Over the years, several sub-regional organizations have teamed with ESCAP to address them by undertaking various activities, having recognized that collective action can build on and complement each other's strengths. In Southeast Asia, ESCAP, as the UN coordinator for the socio-cultural and economic cooperation pillars of the ASEAN UN Plan of Action, finalized with other United Nations entities the next 5-year plan for the period through 2025. ESCAP also provided comprehensive input to the development of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework to ensure that the post-COVID-19 recovery aligns with the ambitions of the 2030 Agenda. ESCAP supports the constructive role of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in ensuring peace and security, helping to foster relations among its 8 members into lasting friendship, prosperity, and harmony. ESCAP is also in discussions with both the Economic Cooperation Organization and the SCO to formalize our cooperation through updates to Memoranda of Understanding with each organization. For South Asia, ESCAP has held high-level policy dialogues covering issues related to cooperation for accelerating recovery from COVID-19 and building back better, as well as disaster and climate resilience in the sub-region involving the secretariats of both SAARC and BIMSTEC. In Northeast Asia, ESCAP and the Greater Tumen Initiative jointly hold annual sub-regional seminars and policy dialogues to enhance collaboration in trade and transport, as well as stronger policy coordination between these sectors. ESCAP works with Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and other UN and regional partners on multiple issues, including climate change and disaster-related migration, displacement and planned relocation, and promoting the rights of persons with disability through the implementation of the Pacific Framework for the Rights of Persons with Disability. ESCAP efforts also target implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals through conveying the Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development and the implementation of the Pacific Roadmap for Sustainable Development. As the region recovers from the COVID pandemic, these partnerships are essentials to ensuring that countries can build back better and in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
I will now invite the heads of sub-regional organizations in Asia and the Pacific to deliver their statements. First, may I invite Her Excellency Dame Meg Taylor, Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. Dame Meg Taylor, the floor is yours. Please unmute.
Can you hear me now? My apologies.
Yes, you may proceed now. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all from the Pacific region. I thank the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific for this opportunity to address this sub-regional dialogue. At the outset, allow me to acknowledge the global efforts that have been invested in trying to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. This has been a global issue like no other and has cost us so many lives across the world. For us in the Pacific region, the pandemic is more than a global health crisis. It has exposed the region's fragile systems and our inherent vulnerabilities and triggered an unprecedented economic crisis. Most importantly, we are now faced with these challenges in the face of our own ongoing battle against the devastating effects of climate change and disasters. The region and indeed the world has entered a new era of volatility, with many development partners capitalizing on the current vulnerabilities to advance their own geopolitical interests and priorities, in particular in the Blue Pacific. I would urge us all to use this sub-regional dialogue as an opportunity to share experiences and identify areas of coordination and, where possible, cooperation. Indeed, if there is one key takeaway from this pandemic, it is this: global challenges require global solutions, and strong international cooperation is absolutely imperative for this. Allow me to reflect for a moment on our experiences and responses in the Pacific region. This time last year, Pacific Island Forum members took bold actions to collectively restrict the spread of COVID-19 and enforced unprecedented containment measures. This resulted in about a third of our Pacific Island Forum members remaining COVID-19 free. While these measures were necessary and saved countless lives, they severely impacted our links to each other and the world and have set our economies back significantly on their development trajectories. In the Pacific region, and indeed across the world, we see rising unemployment and food insecurity. The pandemic has undermined hard-won gains in social cohesion across all economies, and issues such as domestic violence against women has spiked across the region. Key economic sectors, including tourism, have come to a complete standstill for many of our tourism-dependent Forum Island countries, including the Cook Islands, Fiji, Samoa, and Vanuatu. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified and reaffirmed the detrimental resourcing pressures continually faced by all developing countries when health, social, and economic priorities compete for limited budgetary allocations at a national level. As a region, Forum leaders responded quickly and collectively to confront the pandemic by invoking the Bikatawa Declaration, which is our regional framework to collectively respond and support one another in times of crisis. Pacific Forum foreign ministers established the Pacific Humanitarian Pathway, COVID-19, which we refer to as PHPC, and thereby initiating an enabling political environment to efficiently and effectively respond more immediately to member countries' requests for assistance. What set this mechanism apart was that it is an entirely member-driven process and thereby respected and complemented national efforts and regional initiatives in place. From a short to medium term perspective, Forum leaders continue to work to ensure that the region is able to build back better and emerge as more resilient economies from these crises. Indeed, this pandemic and its related crises has been an opportunity for all of us to take a step back and reflect on the resilience of our own economies, our own unique traditional and cultural knowledge, and reinforce and consider how to best support ourselves in times such as this. As we look forward to supporting the rebuilding of economies in our regions, I acknowledge first and foremost that the burden of COVID recovery falls on national governments. And by that tenor, we as regional and international agencies must target our support to best complement national efforts that are underway. That said, in rebuilding our economies, our Forum economic and foreign ministers have identified key focus areas for more immediate attention. We must firstly support social cohesion and ensure quality social services, including health and social protection services that are accessible, effective, and ensure universal coverage so no one is left behind. Secondly, advocate for development packages that are climate smart and support the sustainable management and use of our ocean. And thirdly, we call on partners to support recovery priorities identified through collectively established mechanisms such as the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force. Priorities which include strengthening our e-commerce capacity, building our ability to participate in the digital economy, sustainable development financing that will not add to our economic burden, and pathways to safely open up our borders through the establishment of a regional travel bubble. To reaffirm, whilst we recognise that whilst COVID-19 is our immediate crisis, climate change persists and presents the single greatest threat to our Blue Pacific region over the long term. In looking forward, as a region, we are pursuing innovative solutions to combat climate change and build our region's resilience for the long term. Our hallmark of this endeavour is the ongoing work to develop a 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. It is one that builds on the challenges we are faced with today and looks forward to ensuring that we protect our people, place, prospects, and drive our own development vision for our region. It also includes the development of a Pacific Resilience Facility, the first Pacific designed, led, and owned initiative to build resilience, preparedness, and adaptive capacity of communities before disasters strike. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, effective solidarity starts with our ability to discuss, to talanoa, as we say in the Pacific, to collaborate and formulate meaningful and genuine partnerships. And it is our hope that moving forward, we can work together to deliver for our peoples in the Blue Pacific. I thank you.
Next, may I invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency Dato Lim Jock Hoi, Secretary General of ASEAN.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN remains true to its community vision and adhere to the inclusive, sustainable, and people-centered principle in our efforts to respond to and recover from COVID-19 pandemic. Cognizant of the extensive impacts of the pandemic on all sectors and all peoples in the region, ASEAN leaders adopted the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan in November 2020. This milestone framework served as an exit strategy from the COVID-19 crisis by articulating ASEAN responses through different stages with a focus on sectors and segments of society that are most affected by the pandemic. Through 5 broad strategies, which are health system, human security, economic integration, digital transformation, and sustainable and resilient future, ASEAN adopts proactive and agile approach to ensure effective adaptation to evolving circumstances and to seize the opportunities of regional cooperation. Building back better is a challenging endeavor. Its success depends upon holistic planning, adequate investment, and effective implementation, optimizing the potentials of partnership and stakeholders' engagement. ASEAN is determined to safeguard development progress and achieve longer-term resilience for the benefits of our people. Thank you.
May I now invite His Excellency Mr. Esala Ruwan Wirakun, Secretary General of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, or SAARC. Excellency, please click Request to Speak. Okay.
Honorable Chair, Your Excellency, Dr. Armida Salsia Alisbajana, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, good morning. I thank ESCAP for inviting me to speak at this panel discussion on the sidelines of its 77th session. The theme for this session, Building Back Better from Crises through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific, is timely. I convey sincere gratitude to Excellency Dr. Armida Salsia Alisjabana, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, ESCAP, for her insightful opening remarks, setting the tone of deliberations of this panel discussion. I convey warm greetings to the distinguished heads of regional organizations present. Your presence in this session not only signifies its importance, but it also augurs well for its success. We look forward to benefiting from your insights. Distinguished colleagues, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the world is currently undergoing an unprecedented health and socio-economic crisis. The member countries of SAARC have been severely affected, threatening lives and livelihoods of millions of people. As a result, the social and economic gains achieved by the countries in the region over the past few decades have begun to recede, while challenges to recovery are becoming ever daunting. This unprecedented challenge requires collective action at national, sub-regional, and regional levels. It is in this context that we greatly value the convening of the sub-regional dialogue, bringing together the heads of sub-regional organizations from Asia and the Pacific. The global fight against COVID-19 will not succeed unless vaccines become available to everyone. No one is safe until everyone is safe. This is only possible with collaborative measures to build back better. Excellencies, as with other regional organizations in Asia and the Pacific, SAARC's efforts were geared towards protecting the health of our people from the deadly virus. In this connection, I wish to recall the initiative taken by the Honorable Prime Minister of India to convene the SAARC leaders video conference in March last year, which saw the establishment of an emergency fund of $21 million through voluntary contributions from the member states. As a follow-up to the SAARC leaders video conference, the government of Pakistan took another important initiative to convene the meeting of the SAARC health ministers in April last year. In September of last year, the SAARC finance ministers met virtually to discuss the pandemic's impact on the South Asian economies. In October, the SAARC education ministers met virtually to discuss the education sector's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In November of last year, the SAARC planning ministers met in virtual mode to discuss measures to realign efforts and strategies towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals in the face of the unprecedented threats posed by the pandemic. In addition, several other expert-level meetings have been held to tackle the pandemic's adverse impacts on public health, trade, and finance. Moreover, the SAARC Development Fund has allocated $7.7 million to finance COVID-19 related social projects in the region. During the course of the pandemic, we have participated in the virtual meetings organized by ESCAP and other development partners to learn from the best practices followed by other sub-regions in tackling the threats triggered by the pandemic. We thank ESCAP for convening the high-level policy dialogue and the South Asia Forum on SDGs, respectively in July and December last year. We also applaud the initiative taken by ESCAP to create a South Asia network on SDGs a couple of months ago. Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only brought unprecedented socio-economic challenges to nations in the region, but it has also regressed progress towards SDGs. Despite being on a dynamic and resilient growth path over the past decade, South Asia became one of the worst hit sub-regions in terms of lost output in 2020. Despite several estimates on faster recovery, we are not sure how far these predictions are going to be correct in view of the recent spurt in cases surpassing the previous waves. We are convinced that a business as usual approach will not help us attain SDGs. This unprecedented pandemic requires an unprecedented counter approach from all of us. Another challenge that the countries in South Asia are facing relates to their sustainable graduation out of the status of LDC. 3 out of our 4 LDC members are graduating soon. However, their national aspirations have been shaken by the likely lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This has complicated their process of transition. Extending the window of transition in trade and aid agreements, ensuring preferential market access, enabling them to be eligible for LDC-specific funds and mechanisms for an extended period will help make graduation smoother. Increasingly, they will also need to become active participants in the international marketplace. especially global and regional value chains. These countries will not only need to bring many policy changes within themselves, but they also require support from development partners for a successful transition. I'm convinced that the distinguished panelists will agree with me that these issues are equally important for their sub-regions as well. Sharing of best practices and experiences will benefit all of us. It is in this regard that we believe that ESCAP can play the role of a bridging link and facilitator amongst us. For SAARC, ESCAP has been an active partner, and we look forward to working closely with ESCAP in these endeavors. As we attempt to build back better, it is essential for us to focus on areas of economic diversification and industry-focused structural transformation, raise investments in the core social sectors of health and education, expand social protection, close gender gaps, and improve basic infrastructure for addressing inequalities, ensure food security, agriculture and rural development, and enhance environmental sustainability to green recovery packages, greater investments in renewables, and low carbon technologies. In conclusion, I wish to emphasize that regional cooperation is not only desirable, but indispensable to overcome the challenges posed to the Asia-Pacific sub-regions. This is indeed one of the main lessons distilled from all our diverse responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. The cost of non-cooperation during these times will certainly be higher. I thank Madam Executive Secretary of ESCAP for her leadership and her team led by Dr. Nagesh Kumar for bringing together the heads of sub-regional organizations from Asia and the Pacific to this virtual platform. I thank you.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. Vladimir Norov, Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Dear Ms. Executive Secretary of ESCAP, ladies and gentlemen, I am glad for opportunity to speak at today's session. The COVID-19 pandemic and devastating social economic consequences have tested the resilience of global governance and international institutions, and it has accelerated recognition of the role of health system while highlighting inequalities in access to healthcare and infrastructure across regions and countries. The unprecedented effects of the pandemic are severely damaging development gains, undermining the livelihoods of people, especially the poorest and most vulnerable, and contributing to rising unemployment. Combating determined, concerted and inclusive efforts of the international community, with the UN system playing a central role. In this regard, we commend the initiative of ESCAP to organize this event. There is a high degree of solidarity, unity and cohesion in the region of the ASEAN in addressing the emerging problems and readiness to provide effective mutual support. The Moscow Declaration of the last year's ASEAN Summit emphasizes the need to further strengthen international cooperation in addressing the global political and social-economic consequences of the pandemic. At the same time, the member states emphasized the importance to promote an open world economy based on the principles and rules of the World Trade Organization, oppose unilateral protectionist action that undermine the multilateral trading system and threaten the global economy. Now, engagement of the regional organization in Asia on issues of regional stability and economic development makes a tangible contribution to the full implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. That's why, to address the global political and social economic consequences of the pandemic and achieve sustainable development goals in the Asia-Pacific region, we express our readiness to develop trilateral cooperation in the ASEAN ASEAN format. Thank you for your attention.
May I invite now the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency Mr. Mikhail Myasnikovich, Chairman of the Board of the Eurasian Economic Commission.
Уважаемая госпожа Алис Джабана, уважаемые участники и организаторы мероприятия, благодарю вас за возможность принять участие в 77-й сессии ESCAP, Организации Объединенных Наций. За последние 10 лет мир столкнулся с чередой кризисов, небывалых ранее, по своим масштабам, природе и последствиям для людей, международных отношений и глобальной экономики. Трудности, которые мы преодолеваем сегодня, вызваны не только пандемией. Происходит смена технологических и мирохозяйственных укладов, мир необратимо становится другим. Пандемия вызвала беспрецедентные по масштабу самые сложные негативные эффекты, усложнила устранение и других проблем. На основании предварительных статистических данных в 2020 году валовый внутренний продукт Евразийского экономического союза сократился на 2,9%, что менее существенно, чем снижение глобального ВВП. Наши прогнозы свидетельствуют, что в 2021 году по мере восстановления спроса в ЕАЭС ожидается экономический рост на уровне 3,3%. Для минимизации коронакризиса правительства государств-членов ЕАЭС и уставные руководящие и исполнительные органы Евразийского экономического союза оперативно приняли ряд радикальных и скоординированных действий. Это ограничило скорость распространения вируса. Мы обеспечили управление ресурсами, лекарствами и медицинскими изделиями. Стремились создать условия для эффективного посткризисного восстановления. Огромное значение имела своевременная разработка Российской Федерации высокоэффективных вакцин против коронавируса, организация их поставок и локализация производства в странах Евразийского экономического союза, что может служить позитивным примером интеграционного сотрудничества в интересах миллионов людей. Мы в очередной раз убедились, что для преодоления глобальных вызовов требуется выработка четких шагов и согласованные действия как на национальном, так и на международных уровнях. Расширение форматов взаимодействия и запуск новых диалоговых платформ, в том числе под эгидой Организации Объединенных Наций, являются важнейшими инструментами для определения новых источников экономического роста и обеспечения устойчивого развития. И мы поддерживаем ваши усилия, чтобы эти меры и решения принимались оперативно. С удовлетворением отмечаю возрастающее сотрудничество Евразийской экономической комиссии и ESCAP, которое строится на основе подписанного в 2019 году меморандума о взаимодействии. Поиск новых источников экономического роста и актуализация стратегических приоритетов требует выстраивания новой многополярной модели мировой экономики. Государства-члены ЕАЭС определили активизацию диалога между Евразийским экономическим союзом и третьими странами, интеграционными объединениями и международными организациями в качестве одной из приоритетных задач развития евразийской экономической интеграции на период до 2025 года, что, кстати, закреплено в принятом главами государств-членов ЕС в декабре 2020 года соответствующем документе. Полагаю, что дальнейшему конструированию обновленной международной архитектуры взаимовыгодной кооперации будет способствовать комплекс мер по реализации идеи большого евразийского партнерства, одним из столпов которого является Евразийский экономический союз. Уважаемые участники диалога, хочу пожелать всем присутствующим продуктивной дискуссии и выразить поддержку со стороны Евразийской экономической комиссии инициативам ЭСКАТа по содержанию и достижению странами целей в области устойчивого развития. Спасибо.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. Tenzin Lekpel, Secretary General of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC.
Honorable Presidents, Honorable Prime Ministers, Honorable Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of UN ESCAP, representatives of the members, associate members, observer organizations, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations of the UN ESCAP, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor for me to join the 77th session of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, being held virtually under the theme Building Back Better from Crisis through Regional Cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. The theme of ESCAP's current session could not be more relevant, as the world is currently reeling from the crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. BIMSTEC, the organization I represent, brings together a large part of South Asia and a significant portion of Southeast Asia. In the context of our cooperation with the United Nations, BIMSTEC has been regularly engaging with UN ESCAP and sharing our experiences and good practices in the areas of mutual interest as mandated by the member states. Like all other countries, the BIMSTEC member state attaches utmost importance to the recovery and rehabilitation process posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The BIMSTEC member states at the recent 17th ministerial meeting held on 1st April 2021 reiterated their commitment to strengthen cooperation on public health issues in the Bay of Bengal region and recognized the need to strengthen regional capacity on public health through collaborative research, training of healthcare personnel, and development of regional value chains for pharmaceutical industries. The ministerial meeting also underlined the need for coordination and cooperation with international organizations to address the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. In line with these strong commitments, we agreed to establish an expert group on public health and build a stronger collaboration among the traditional medicine experts in finding ways to combat COVID-19. Distinguished delegates, in our efforts to build back better, it is important to learn from good examples of collaboration and cooperation in ensuring that no one is left behind in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Timely exchange of information and sharing of best practices would be necessary in responding to the current pandemic. Technology, as we have seen over the past year, plays a huge part in fighting against the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Pooling resources and expertise in managing such crises is getting more serious and urgent. The pandemic does not differentiate between the rich and the poor, nor between nationalities or color. We all know that no single country can be free of the pandemic if the rest of the world is not free from it. Therefore, concerted efforts to work together to respond to these challenges need to be given due priority and attention. It has now become even more critical to share vital resources, skills, knowledge, and speed up the management and recovery process for the whole of humanity. Coordination and partnership in vaccine production is beginning to be seen as the prime feature to address this global concern. The issue of TRIPS waiver to COVID-19 vaccines at the WTO may be considered important in recovering the world from COVID-19. Therefore, we would like to encourage all stakeholders to strengthen and take forward urgently the multilateral partnership arrangements such as access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator and the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access Facility. I wish to conclude by saying that strengthening the regional organizations and cooperation is paramount and the way forward to materialize the process of achieving the SDGs and in tackling COVID-19 recovery. From our part, the BIMSTEC Secretariat will closely follow up on the development of the COVID-19 pandemic with our valuable available resources and will continue to make suitable recommendations to the BIMSTEC member states and beyond. Finally, I wish to reiterate that BIMSTEC remains committed to supporting regional efforts for building back better from COVID-19 and other crises. Thank you.
May I now invite His Excellency Dr. Hadi Sulaimanpur, Secretary General of the Economic Cooperation Organization, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. We cannot hear. Please unmute. Sorry, Excellency, we cannot hear.
Now you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Madam Executive Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning in a very early morning in Tehran. It is an honor for me to address this August gathering in connection with the 77th session of the Commission being held virtually at a very crucial juncture of human history. Before I move further, I would like to offer my heartfelt sympathy to the people around the globe, and particularly in our continent, who are suffering during the COVID pandemic. This natural catastrophe reminds us of the urgent need to build resilience and sustainable society through collaborative efforts at regional and sub-regional level. Excellencies, the theme for this year's session truly defines the significance of collaboration and partnership for swift recovery, as well as crucial role of regional groupings in building community resilience for reducing vulnerabilities to further disasters through well-balanced disaster risk reduction as measures and revitalizing socio-economic development. The COVID-19 pandemic has reshaped regional and global socio-economic trends. To remain relevant, regional organizations should act regionally while engaged globally. Interregional complementary at continental level provides the regional organizations with more opportunity to be a meaningful part of socio-economic development of their regions. Ladies and gentlemen, in line with recent global priorities and UN SDGs, the 14th ECO Summit was organized in March 2021 under the theme of Regional Economic Cooperation in the Aftermath of COVID-19. The ECO Summit assessed the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economies of the region, providing strategic direction for enhanced regional cooperation in alleviating the adverse socio-economic impact of the pandemic and transforming the eco-region to be a resilience through intra and interregional cooperation in order to strengthen the preparedness for a more coordinated response in future. Distinguished colleagues, in the face of COVID-19, the regional organizations and sub-regional grouping have a crucial role to play for bringing swift economic and socio-economic recovery, enhancing our resilience to future disasters. In this regard, following proposals may be considered. First, the economies of developing countries, including those of Asian Pacific nations, have contracted with increased poverty and inequality in the region. Trade and investment is an engine of economic growth and vital for sustainable socio-economic development of the national and regional economies. Connectivity in the region is also a prerequisite for boosting intra and interregional economic cooperation and integration in the global economy. It is also a key factor for ensuring supply chain during crisis. To boost regional economic recovery in the post-COVID era in a sustainable and long-term manner, there is a strong need to facilitate regional trade and investment as well as smooth connectivity. And in this regard, the complementary roles of the sub-regional organization is indispensable. In the wake of latest global trends, joint projects for establishment of regional economic corridors are highly recommended. Second, recognizing the cooperation in the field of health among the countries of the region, we should adapt a mechanism with the assistance of ESCAP to build resilient healthcare system to respond to such crises and natural disasters in future. Third, promoting regional cooperation and integration as a means to strengthen resilience to shared vulnerabilities of landlocked countries and to support initiatives that help to transform landlocked countries into land-linked countries are very essential. Since 7 countries of the ECO region are landlocked, ECO is currently engaged in promotion of several transport corridors. Joint projects to address special challenges and needs of landlocked developing countries may be proved instrumental. Gaps in infrastructure connectivity prevents the benefit of economic growth for being shared with more vulnerable groups. This gives rise to inequality that impacts the social cohesion and stability of our region and societies. There is a need to increase the regional investment in infrastructure development. We encourage the ESCAP to explore partnership to finance joint projects of infrastructural development. In this way, effective regional financial system to support regions' infrastructure development also is required. Fourth, balance building back better approach toward the social, energy, and environmental aspect of development with emphasis on recognizing the importance joint projects on clean energy and efficient action to combat climate change for ensuring regional sustainable development and resilience regional economies is required in the aftermath of COVID-19. In collaboration with ESCAP and sub-regional partners, joint measures may be adapted to build more resilient societies that are able to withstand natural disasters and recover from them in the effective manners. Madam Executive Secretary, because of its diverse membership, location, and potential to contribute to the economic growth of the member countries, ECHO is drawing renewed interest of the regional and global partners, including ESCAP, for jointly address the socio-economic development needs of the region. ECHO values its cooperative relations with ESCAP and other regional organizations in our continent greatly, as it is a means to achieve common regional goals through regional cooperation and collaboration. The diversity in UNESCAP's membership enable regional countries to benefit from others' strengths for achieving shared goals for attaining sustainable and resilient economies. The SCAP remains a valuable partner in promoting inter-regional collaboration to advance our common goals, with which the ECHO will continue to engage constructively in order to achieve the common objectives in the post-COVID-19 era. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Finally, I invite Mr. Andres Morodin, Director of the Greater Two-Men Initiative, or GTI, to deliver his statement. Mr. Smorodin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to participate in this sub-regional dialogue of the 77th session of ESCAP and share GTI's experience and perspectives on regional cooperation for building back better from the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has confronted the world with an unprecedented situation. Despite the challenges, we in GTI have been maintaining a constant communication with our stakeholders in different sectors. During the past year, we were able to hold most of the planned events and activities, including the annual meeting of the GTI's decision-making body, the GTI Consultative Commission. Members of the Consultative Commission, during their meeting in December last, recognized that the member states have responded swiftly and effectively to the outbreak and spread of the COVID-19 with appropriate measures in comparison with other regions and countries. One of the essential outcomes of the GTI-CC meeting was the adoption of the GTI Strategic Action Plan for the years 2021-2024, which will provide midterm guidance towards future GTI cooperation. Sectorial action plans have also been or are being designed to reflect the continuing challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering the still existing effects of the pandemic, maintaining resilience of supply chains and stable trade and investment environment in the region are much more essential than any other time. GTI member states are striving to promote policy coordination, infrastructure connectivity, unimpeded trade, financial integration, and people-to-people bonds through maximizing the synergy between GTI and regional cooperation initiatives such as Eurasian Economic Union, Belt and Road Initiative, and others. Besides, in view of ongoing and emerging regional initiatives for cooperation in the medical and health sphere in Northeast Asia, such as vaccination, control of infectious diseases, mutual recognition of vaccination certificates, etc., we in the GTI Secretariat stand ready to provide necessary coordination and facilitation support for such joint efforts among our member states. Strengthening the partnership with other international organizations is one of the GTI's strategic objectives. We recognize the importance of intensified interaction and exchanges among cooperation platforms in the region. Earlier this year, the GTI Secretariat and ESCAP ENEA office discussed and agreed on cooperation directions and joint activities and connectivity for the year 2021. Besides holding joint seminars in transport and trade sectors, which have successfully been held during the last few years, we hope that we could further build on those positive examples and initiate a cross-sectoral event or other forms of activities. Moreover, as proposed by our ESCAP colleagues, we plan to expand our cooperation to other fields, such as, for example, energy sector. We look forward to further coordination with ESCAP and other regional organizations of ongoing activities, as well as initiation of new joint projects. Finally, I would like to express confidence that a present session of ESCAP will bring about substantial contribution to building back better from crisis through regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. Thank you.
I now open the floor for brief country interventions. And because we have gone over time, I would like to urge all speakers to please limit your interventions to just 2 minutes. I repeat, just 2 minutes, please. So the first speaker is Bangladesh, to be followed by China. Bangladesh, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. As we speak, the COVID-19 pandemic is spreading aggressively, taking lives, ravaging livelihoods. This situation has presented us the threat that it poses to humanity, and at the same time, the opportunities that we have for redesigning systems for a better pro-people and multilateral socio-economic structure. In Bangladesh, Excellency, we have announced a stimulus package worth about $14.6 billion, around 4.4% of our GDP, for widening social protection, retaining jobs, and bolstering the economy. Our Honorable Prime Minister's visionary policy approach of striking balance between life and livelihood during this pandemic have helped us to overcome the challenges till now. Now, let me connect the country experience to the South Asian region. The sub-region has overall suffered both in terms of loss of lives and economic loss. However, the response is impressive. As mentioned by the SAARC Secretary General, a COVID-19 emergency fund was established within the SAARC framework with $21.8 million. Member states of the BIMSTEC also expressed their commitment to strengthen the cooperation. We're already seeing regional cooperation as the most viable option for shared prosperity. Thus, in the spirit of multilateral cooperation, grounded in firm sub-regional commitment to a better future, special attention might be given to gender, digital equality, knowledge economy, sensitizing good social practices, and compliance to law and order across socio-economic strata. Madam Chair, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, had always been the strongest proponent of equity and justice. Therefore, in the spirit of SDG 17, Let us come together in building back stronger and more resilient. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh, for your statement. The next speaker is China, to be followed by India. China, you have the floor now.
有些女士、子敏女士、女士们、先生们，感谢各个区域组织的发言。面对变革动荡的世界，面对不稳定、不确定性上升的亚太，各类区域和次区域组织应团结合作，共同促进亚太和平、稳定和可持续发展。第一，深化次区域合作，促进多边主义。我们所处的时代既充满挑战，也充满希望。各区域和次区域组织应加强沟通协作，坚持以联合国为核心的国际体系，深化次区域合作。应摒弃冷战思维和零和博弈，坚持真正的多边主义，努力削减治理赤字、信任赤字、发展赤字、和平赤字，实现普遍安全，促进共同发展。第二，应协调次区域政策，凝聚复苏合力。各次区域机制应加强域内国家的政策对话和协调，增进域内互联互通、贸易与投资、数字经济、绿色发展等领域的发展，加大对社会保障等民生领域的投入，构建开放型世界经济。第三，应加强同 ESCAP 的对接，强调分工协作。次区域机制应发挥各自的特点和优势，加强同 ESCAP 合作，协助各成员落实2030年可持续发展议程。女士们、先生们，中方期待 ESCAP 及各次区域机制加强合作，增进次区域层面的交流互鉴，携手推进亚太地区可持续发展和疫后重建，开创共享共赢、发展繁荣的未来。谢谢。
Thank you, China, for your statement. The next speaker is India, to be followed by Japan. India, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For India, as for the rest of the world, COVID-19 has been an unprecedented disaster, resulting in immeasurable impact on health management services, as well as causing major disruption to economic activity. In the Asia-Pacific region, South Asia, accounting for about 21% of 21% of world's population, has been the most severely affected by the pandemic. While the magnitude and intensity of this shock may vary across regions, nevertheless, the challenges faced by all regions are manifold, and they need to be addressed through a collaborative approach. Madam Chair, realizing the importance of a collaborative approach to mitigate the disastrous impact of the crisis, the South Asia region has from the very beginning taken a number of steps to join forces in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. As the crisis was unfolding, the SAARC leaders met on 15th March 2020 to chalk out a strategy to fight the pandemic. Thereafter, through various interactions involving SAARC health ministers, SAARC planning ministers, health secretaries, senior trade officials, etc., the strategy and the region's response was further fine-tuned. A COVID-19 emergency fund was set up to mitigate the risk associated with the pandemic in the region. India has contributed $10 million to the fund. This fund can be used by any of the partner countries to meet the cost of immediate actions. We also shared our resources, medicines, PPE, and testing equipment, and more importantly, we shared our national experience and best practices through webinars, online courses, and IT portals. Similarly, the other forum in the Bay of Bengal region, BIMSTEC, met in June 2020, and the member states resolved to work together to combat the impact of the pandemic. BIMSTEC has been actively promoting physical and economic connectivity in the region and is also mandated to promote collective action to address vulnerabilities like natural disasters, food security, climate change, and communicable diseases. Madam Chair, it is a matter of satisfaction that ESCAP's sub-regional office in New Delhi over the years has effectively collaborated with sub-regional organizations such as SAARC and BIMSTEC. and has become a platform for exchanging best practices and development experiences. We believe that intergovernmental organizations like ESCAP can supplement efforts of countries of South Asia and others in the Asia-Pacific region in rebooting their economies, accelerating progress on achieving SDGs, and in shaping regional engagement on health, trade, and connectivity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, India, for the statement. The next speaker is Japan. Japan, you have the floor. Thank you.
Before we move on to the agenda item 3, under this agenda item 2, I just would like to say a few words. I will be very short. In the previous statement by the Republic of Korea, there were some references to the treated water at Tokyo Electric Power Company's Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station, which is not the topic of this meeting. Discharge of the treated and purified water and not the contaminated water will be implemented, complying with relevant international law and the domestic regulations and rules, as well as ensuring safety. Japan will continue to provide information and explain the situation to the international community in a transparent manner. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan, for your statement. There being no other request for the floor, we now conclude this agenda item. Excellencies, Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, the Commission will now consider agenda item 3, Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing, and Pacific Island Developing Countries. The documents pertinent to this agenda item are ESCAP/77/6 on summary of progress in the implementation of Commission resolutions, Resolution 75/1, and then ESCAP/77/4 entitled Summary of the Asia-Pacific Countries with Special Needs Development Report 2021, Strengthening the Resilience of the Least Developed Countries in the Wake of the Coronavirus disease pandemic. The Commission's consideration of this agenda item will be facilitated by remarks from eminent speakers and interventions from ministers of least developed countries from across the region. I will now open the floor for brief country interventions. At the outset, I'm pleased to invite the Executive Secretary, Ms. Armida Salcia Alisjabana, to deliver some introductory remarks and present the Asia-Pacific Countries with Special Needs Development Report 2021. Madam Executive Secretary, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing, and Pacific Island Developing Countries. For our deliberation today, I present to you document E/ESCAP/77/4, Summary of the Asia-Pacific Countries with Special Needs Development Report 2021, Strengthening the Resilience of Least Developed Countries in the Wake of the Coronavirus Disease Pandemic. The document focuses on the development challenges of the region's least developed countries, or LDCs, by taking stock of their progress made in implementing the Istanbul Program of Action for LDCs, which concluded in 2020. It also examines the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic on these countries to provide perspectives on how the pandemic affects their prospects to achieve SDGs by 2030. Excellencies, please allow me to highlight key findings and progress that has been achieved by LDCs in implementing the Istanbul Program of Action. It is important to note that most of the LDCs in Asia-Pacific region made significant progress in implementing the Istanbul Program of Action. During the decade 2011-2020, covered by the program, 3 countries were able to graduate from LDC category, and another 10 of the region's remaining 11 LDCs have met the criteria for graduation. By the end of this decade, almost all LDCs in our region may have graduated. This is clearly a sign of the development success of these countries. However, the LDCs in our region have encountered significant challenges and continue to face vulnerabilities, especially since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. On the economic front, in the final year of the implementation period of the Istanbul Program of Action, GDP growth grew only at an estimated average of 3% as compared to the pre-pandemic weighted average rate of 7.2%. The pandemic has caused widespread unemployment in LDCs, particularly in the informal sector. It has led to contractions in export from Asian Pacific LDCs that were deeper than the global average. At the same time, FDI flows and remittances appear to have declined because of disruptions caused by the pandemic, while the share of total official development assistance, or ODA, allocated to all LDCs has already been on a declining trend. On social development issues, the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded existing social vulnerabilities. Education systems have been severely disrupted by the pandemic, which may impact development prospects for decades to come. The pandemic has increased poverty rates and exacerbated existing inequalities, particularly those related to gender. ESCAP analysis shows that up to an additional 12 million people could fall below the 3.2% daily income poverty line owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, while multidimensional poverty is also on the rise in the Asia-Pacific LDCs. Indeed, as the nature of poverty in these countries is changing, addressing it has become much more complex. At this critical juncture, governments in their preparation for graduation and smooth transition must acquire a much more holistic focus on sustainability. We must acknowledge that economic growth alone is not sufficient to ensure sustainable development. I encourage policymakers from LDCs as well as their development partners to initiate a sustained socio-economic recovery, including through strengthening public health and social protection systems. To enhance resource mobilization efforts, a post-COVID-19 recovery strategy must be tailored to address the gaps that have held back financing deepening and to expand the range of financial products and services as a policy priority. I welcome the G20 Debt Service Suspension Initiative for the poorest countries, including several Asia-Pacific LDCs, together with increased assistance in accessing COVID-19 vaccine to reduce additional pressure on government fiscal space. Let us strengthen productive capacity and promote structural economic transformation in addressing multidimensional poverty. Governments need to increase their efforts to expand trade capacity and move up in the resilient regional value chain, with the Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Cross-Border Paperless Trade being a promising initiative. Investments must be scaled up to encourage carbon-neutral production and consumption systems and to enhance opportunities of digital technology. In conclusion, the pandemic also provides an opportunity for Asia-Pacific LDCs to reassess their development strategies to ensure a smooth transition and to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs. Forging development cooperation and extending international support measures to LDCs are essential policy tools in building back better and deepening resilience of the region's most vulnerable countries, which is the LDCs. The special body is invited to debate on the findings and policy considerations presented in this document and provide guidance to the Secretariat on further support towards the implementation of the global programs of action for least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states of our region. Your solution-oriented recommendations will be an important contribution in the process leading to the 5th UN Conference on the Least Developed Countries in 2022. I wish the special body every success. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video message of Ms. Fekita Moweloa Katoa Utoy Kamanu, High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States.
Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar, Honorable Ministers, Ambassadors and Permanent Representatives, ladies and gentlemen, first, I must thank ESCAP for the opportunity. I am Executive Secretary in my role as High Representative, as well as personally. I thank you for the special focus and priority you give to issues of LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. All of us remain deeply concerned by yet another resurgence of COVID-19 with new and worrying variants. While we have some signs of improvements in a few places, too many countries remain under high alert and stress. At first glance, one could be tempted to say that after all, the number of casualties might not be that high in LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. As we all know, and while we all here have deep sympathy for too many losses of life and the suffering of families and relatives that comes with it, the pandemic has brought about and will continue to have complex and far-reaching impacts on all our lives. The LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS face disproportionately the financial, economic, and social impacts of this global crisis. Already now, we see poverty on the rise and malnutrition has made a return. The fiscal space of governments shrinks rapidly as revenue from internal and external sources keep diminishing, and an overlying concerning situation. Already prior to the pandemic, it was evident that limited progress had been achieved in the implementation of the SDGs. United Nations already had alerted that the goals of the 2030 Agenda were unlikely to be achieved in many of the countries. Now we see the onset of reversal of what has been achieved, and there is real danger that once again the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS will be left behind. I can only call again on all that these countries need urgent and dedicated attention in the period we now have of less than a decade to achieve this promise that we made to leave no one behind. Needless to say, equitable and affordable access to vaccine is the top priority. The LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS continue to face enormous difficulties in accessing vaccines, let alone rollout of vaccination programs. Vaccination programs have barely commenced, and we must not underestimate the logistical complexities from securing appropriate vaccines to vaccinating people. We need faster action, otherwise LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS will face serious humanitarian and economic misery for months, if not years, with all the instabilities inherent in such situations. Currently, the emergency recovery measures countries engage in are highly constrained by the extremely limited resources available, and often the limited safety nets available are not sufficient. Beyond the public health imperative, the key priorities is to ensure that LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS have the fiscal space to vaccinate, recover, and ultimately invest in the SDGs and the globally agreed climate goals. This demands that beyond domestic action, existing funding commitments are met and that new innovative financing is made available. Indeed, the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS are faced with unsustainable external debt burdens. Over half of the countries are at risk of debt distress or in debt distress situation. While DSSI and other debt relief measures are welcome initiatives, countries need comprehensive debt relief measures through a revitalized global debt architecture. The ongoing discussions on the allocation of the 650 billion SDR are encouraging. The spring meeting of the Bretton Woods institutions has already agreed on this new allocation of SDRs. However, it remains of concern that LDCs, as per their quota shares, will only receive 3.5% of this allocation. LLDCs and SIDS will also receive only a meager share of the new allocation. It is important to have a decision on the reallocation of excess SDRs to LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. As far as OHR LLS is concerned, the support to LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS have been stepped up. A series of virtual briefings took place. The LLDC, LLDC, and SIDS group issued statements and positions on COVID-19 reflecting their special challenges and needs and what must be done to address the impacts of the pandemic and build back better. This brings me to an update of where we stand in the preparations for LDC 5. The organizational session of the PrepCom and the African Regional Review was held in February 2021. Both meetings were successful in terms of their high level of participation and the depth of substantive discussions. On April 23rd, the president of the ECOSOC organized a special meeting on LDCs and LLDCs on the theme Financing Resilient Recovery from Cascading Effects of COVID-19 in LDCs and LLDCs. The President of the General Assembly and the President of ECOSOC will organize a half-day event on the 18th of June 2021 with a focus on the accelerated implementation of the SDGs in LDCs in the context of COVID-19. The Asia-Pacific Regional Review meeting will be held in Dhaka from the 28th of June to the 2nd of July, jointly with ESCAP and Bangladesh in a hybrid format. The Dhaka meeting will focus on graduation in the context of COVID-19. 10 out of 12 Asia-Pacific LDCs, including Yemen, are at some point in the graduation pipeline. Vanuatu just graduated on the 4th of December 2020. The Dhaka meeting will focus on strategies and policy measures at the national, regional, and global levels to ensure smooth transitions and accelerated implementation of the SDGs in the added context of the devastating impacts of COVID-19. The outcome of this meeting will be a ministerial declaration of LDCs in turn to serve as an important basis for the outcome of LDC 5. We invite you all to actively participate in this meeting. OHR LLS convenes an academic conference in Helsinki, Finland at the end of August. The idea is to stimulate new thinking on key thematic areas for LDC 5. The 2 preparatory committee meetings for LDC 5 will be held in New York from the 24th to the 28th of May 2021 and from the 26th to 30th of July 2021 respectively. The first PrepCom meeting will feature a high-level opening session and 6 interactive thematic sessions. Once again, I count on your active participation and contributions to the PrepCom meeting. The United Nations Development System and the RC system are also fully engaged in the preparatory process. 6 rounds of agency meetings have already taken place. Last but not least, OHR LLS prepares a series of reports and analytical papers to inform the discussions for LDC 5. I also wish to acknowledge the invaluable work of ESCAP with its Asia-Pacific countries with your special needs Development Report 2021, looking at strengthening the resilience of least developed countries in the wake of the coronavirus disease pandemic. The report provides an excellent account of the status of the implementation of the IPOA in the Asia-Pacific LDCs, elaborates on the impact of COVID-19, and comes up with important recommendations we must include in the next program of action for LDCs. The outputs from all these meetings and reports will form the basis of the LDC 5 Zero Draft Outcome document. The LDC group is expected to take the lead in preparing the Zero Draft and is expected to submit it by mid-June. I also wish to acknowledge the strong commitment of the LDC 5 host country, Qatar. Organizational preparations are proceeding rapidly. Qatar will support the participation of LDCs in the conference. For the LLDCs, We are now more than halfway on the road to implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. OHR LLS, together with the LLDC group, developed a UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA. The roadmap builds on the outcome of the midterm review. The roadmap will also assist in addressing the impact of COVID-19 in LLDCs, especially on the impacts related to transit and cross-border collaboration. For SIDS, we are working on the development of a multidimensional vulnerability index for small island developing states. A series of technical webinars amongst peer institutions have been organized. Participating institutions have been working on approaches to vulnerability indexes and will present their work and exchange views and perspectives to inform the Secretary General's report. OHR LLS also supports the work of the Steering Committee on SIDS partnerships to foster new and follow up existing partnerships to accelerate the implementation of the Samoa pathway. We have all faced an exceedingly difficult year, and we are still going through and will continue to go through challenging times. In closing, I can only say again that it is by working together in genuine partnership and in a spirit of global solidarity that we can overcome a challenge of unknown proportions and ensure that we do not once again leave the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS behind. Thank you.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video message of Professor Jose Antonio Ocampo, Chair of the Committee on Development Policy of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, or ECOSOC. He is also Professor of Professional Practice in International and Public Affairs and Director of the Economic and Political Development Concentration in the School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia University.
I am glad to join this meeting of the special body of least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and Pacific Island developing states that takes place during the annual session of ESCAP. I send my strong greetings to all government representatives and to the staff of ESCAP and other United Nations organizations supporting this process. The Committee for Development Policy, which I have the opportunity to chair, concluded the 2021 triennial review of the list of least developed countries in February. From the perspective of the Asia-Pacific region, the triennial review was a demonstration of its development success. We recommended 3 LDCs in this region for graduation: Bangladesh, Laos PDR, and Nepal. 2 more LDCs, Myanmar and Timor-Leste, were technically qualified, but we decided to defer a possible recommendation to the next triennial review in 2024 to further assess the development prospects. In 2024, we will also consider Cambodia, which met this year the criteria for graduation for the first time, along 4 LDCs from Africa. In addition, 1 country in the region, Vanuatu, graduated last year. 2, Bhutan and Solomon Islands, are already graduating, and 2 more, Kiribati and Tuvalu, have been recommended before. Hence, at the end of this decade, there may be almost no LDC left in Asia and the Pacific. This would be a remarkable sign of progress and an achievement in line with the Agenda 2030. LDCs in Asia and the Pacific, the development partners and the international community can be proud of this progress. But the progress must not be used as an argument for complacency. Graduation itself can pose challenges that must and can be managed. Most importantly, graduation within the next 5 years and even the decade will happen in very challenging times. The key common challenge is COVID-19. Preparations for graduation will have to happen in parallel to dealing with the pandemic and working on the recovery. For this reason, we at the CDP suggested that all countries recommended for graduation this year are accorded an extended period of 5 years to prepare. We also committed to carefully monitor the development progress in graduating countries over the coming years to see whether COVID-19 and other shocks require further international action. COVID-19 also calls for special support to LDCs. In our view, they should get priority in access to vaccination in line with the principle of reaching the furthest behind first. Happily, LDCs in the region are also in the lead among LDCs to vaccinate the population against COVID-19. But far more needs to be done by the international community. Public health systems of LDC in the region have been remarkably effective in limiting the spread of COVID-19 despite limited resources. But efforts to strengthen public health need to be stepped up both by countries and their partners. However, there are other challenges as well, which often vary country by country. Some LDCs have greatly benefited from duty-free, quota-free market access in developed and key developing countries. Adjusting to non-LDC status implies reducing the reliance on such preferences. It also requires sufficiently long phasing out periods after the actual graduation date. For others, external debt is becoming a key challenge. Hence, we are calling for an effective debt relief, as mere suspending debt service is insufficient. Debt relief is clearly a global issue, but many of the key actors are here in the region. Most LDCs in the region are also highly vulnerable to climate change and disasters, making continued support imperative. The final key graduation challenge is to ensure a sustainable and inclusive transformation of LDC's economies. The next program of action for the LDCs to be adopted in Doha next year will be key to advance their development. The program of action must include a focus on graduation with meaningful graduation support measures. Regional interest clearly demands that LDCs and its regional partners, not least ESCAP, strongly advocate for and negotiate such support. Better graduation support should also include an improved monitoring mechanism that links monitoring to concrete policy interventions in case countries face setbacks to a smooth transition. The next program of action also needs a well-thought-through organizing framework. Merely listing many objectives as suggested action will not advance the interests of LDCs and their partners. We at the CDP have long proposed the theme of expanding productive capacity for sustainable development as the organizing framework. The lack of productive capacity has been identified as a key problem of LDCs. The progress toward graduation clearly shows that LDCs in Asia and the Pacific have made progress in productive capacity and made extremely valuable experiences to be shared with LDCs in other parts of the world. But expanding productive capacity to ensure continued development progress in a post-graduation and post-COVID-19 world will be critical for LDCs in the region as well. I thank you very much for your attention.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. A.H.M. Mustafa Kamal, Minister of Finance, Bangladesh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to greet you all, the iconic personalities of this planet, working for the cause of humanity. The year 2021 is very distinct and auspicious for our nation. We are celebrating two historic events this year, the Golden Jubilee of our independence and the birth centenary of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, concurrently. Receiving United Nations final recommendation for our graduation from the LDC status to a developing country in the same year has added another historic milestone and made this year more momentous for us. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic posed a great concern worldwide, and Bangladesh is no exception. COVID has put negative impacts on employment. Negative impacts on employment, income, business, investment, international trade, and almost all other aspects of life. The government of Bangladesh, under the dynamic leadership of our Prime Minister, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, has rolled out 23 stimulus packages, and it amounts to about $14.6 billion, which is almost 4.44% of our GDP, to overcome the negative impacts of pandemic. We adopted expansionary fiscal and monetary policies to ensure enough purchasing power, employment, and credit facilities. A far-sighted balance between lives and livelihood has not only saved lives from pandemic, but also returned jobs to millions. First wave of COVID-19 has been managed successfully in Bangladesh, though new waves has started now as elsewhere in the world. Having started vaccination on the 7th of February 2021, Bangladesh has administered more than 6 million doses by now. For the extraordinary leadership during COVID-19, our Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, has been named by the Commonwealth among the top 3 inspirational women leaders. Distinguished delegates, the upcoming LDC-5 conference should keep several points in the purview of especially country and global level actions required for the recovery from COVID-19, graduating LDCs and their aftermath challenges, implementation of the Agenda 2030. I wish that we will get back our development momentum and move forward with concerted efforts. Bangladesh always remains committed to take part and extend all our support in all international and regional endeavors. I thank you all for your attention. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu. May Bangladesh live forever. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency Mr. Thandi Dorji, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Bhutan.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from the Kingdom of Bhutan. I thank Her Excellency, the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for inviting me to speak at this important forum. More than a year into the global pandemic, we are faced with the reality that in the Asia-Pacific region alone, almost 90 million people have been pushed back into extreme poverty. The socioeconomic disruptions caused by the pandemic are even greater for those of us from the LDCs, LLDCs, and Pacific Island developing countries. Bhutan is also experiencing the adverse impacts brought about by the pandemic. Our economy is severely disrupted and the GDP is projected to fall to -6.1%. Despite these challenges and the significant strain on our already limited resources, the government under the leadership of His Majesty the King has ensured that the COVID-19 situation is under control while livelihoods are protected through welfare and employment schemes. I am also happy to share that Bhutan's entire eligible population has received their first dose of vaccination recently. With this, we see a ray of hope for recovery and restoration to normal life. Excellencies, Bhutan remains committed to graduate from the LDC category by December 2023. We believe we owe it to ourselves and to our international partners who have supported us through many decades of our socioeconomic development. We are working towards a smooth and sustainable graduation despite the fact that hard-earned gains have been severely impeded by the pandemic and that Bhutan has not been able to achieve the threshold for the Critical Economic Vulnerability Index. Our current 12 5-year plan will address last-mile challenges in all sectors and ensure that Bhutan's graduation is sustainable and irreversible. Besides the regular development programs, several dedicated flagship programs are being implemented to address high-priority national issues that will contribute to diversification and economic growth. As we look towards recovery from the pandemic and embark on the preparation for LDC 5, we must reflect on how well we have fared across the 8 priority areas of the Istanbul Programme of Action. We particularly need to look at how the LDCs, LLDCs, and Pacific Island developing countries can be better prepared to absorb such shocks in the future. There is also a need to review the smooth transition strategy to ensure that countries graduating from the LDC category do not fall back. Graduating countries must be supported rather than penalized through the withdrawal of international support measures related to trade, development, cooperation, and financing. Lastly, I call upon this August group to commit to deepening our partnerships to end the crisis and to build back better from the pandemic. I thank you and Tashtile.
Next, may I invite His Excellency Mr. Lee Tuch, Senior Minister, President of the National Committee for ESCAP, Cambodia, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Greeting from Cambodia. I'm humbled to speak at this special body of LDCs, focusing on strengthening the resilience of least developed countries in the wake of the coronavirus disease pandemic. On behalf of the government of Cambodia, I would like to express my profound thanks and high appreciation to ESCAP for hosting this important event and inviting me to share my insight. Cambodia's economy has not been spared from the crisis inflicted by the pandemic. The adverse impact of low-income households is particularly acute, empereling the significant progress made in reducing extreme poverty in 1990s. In the face of this COVID-19 crisis, regional and global cooperation is needed to adapt the rule-based multilateral system and make it work better for all. COVID-19 has accelerated structural shifts that were already taking place. Digital and technological adaptation have speeded up thanks to the common cause brought about by the pandemic to encourage all countries to work together. Madam Chair, I'd like to share with you the concerted efforts that has been made by the government of Cambodia to build the country's resilience. First, Cambodia has tried to collaborate with all nations around the world to fight this invisible enemy. We have avoided racial discrimination and the attitude of the blame game, which can lead to a breakup of unity, while the rest of the world trying to remain united in fighting COVID-19. In the spirit of humanitarian and international solidarity, Cambodia allowed the Westerdam cruise ship, loaded with more than 2,200 passengers, to dock in mid-February 2020. As of now, Cambodia has not only provided treatment to Cambodians, but also foreign citizens free of charge. In addition to Cambodians and foreign nationals currently residing and working in Cambodia can get vaccinated against COVID-19 at no charge. For your information, so far, the population of Cambodia, 12% of Cambodian population has been vaccinated. We are second from Singapore in our ASEAN region. Second, Cambodia believes the battle against COVID-19 requires joint prudent decision-making under the framework of multilateralism by respecting the national laws and the sovereignty of each individual nation, regardless of its size and wealth, with the United Nations and the WHO as the core agencies. In this spirit, we would like to reiterate Cambodia's support for the roles of the United Nations and the WHO in their global efforts to respond and fight against this pandemic. Along with the United Nations, Cambodia would like to underline the importance and urgency of COVID-19 vaccines as a global public good, accessible, and affordable for all, of which supply and distribution shall be carried out in a humanitarian spirit for all countries, especially the most vulnerable ones. Going forward, we must accept that we cannot go back to pre-crisis period, and there is a need to adopt to a new normal and to build back better, which can be only attained through regional cooperation. At the same time, liquidity assistance is urgently needed for countries confronting health crisis and external funding shortfalls, including through debt relief and financing. Third, on policy coordination, Cambodia thinks that all countries should collaborate to avoid unwanted consequences inflicted by implementing protectionism policies. For instance, restrictions of exports of food and medicines to ensure enough supplies in exporting countries can lead to scarcity, price rises, and panic in importing countries. Instead, the international community must vastly step up its support of policy national initiatives, including providing assistance to countries with limited care capacity and additionally of funding for vaccine production as trials advance, so that adequate, affordable doses are quickly available to all countries. Fourth, building on record drop in greenhouse gas emissions during the pandemic, policy decision makers should both implement their climate change mitigation commitments and work together to scale up equitably designed carbon taxation or equivalent schemes. Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, I would like to reiterate that Cambodia is ready to join all relevant development partners, both bilateral and multilateral, to contribute to the efforts to restoring the socio-economic situation and promoting prosperity for all as well as to build back better from crisis through regional cooperation in the post-COVID-19 era. I believe that our efforts and collaboration will certainly enable us to achieve the sustainable development vision in spite of some delays, of course. Finally, I wish for this session to be fruitful and wish all participants and honorable delegates at the session peace, health, and happiness. I thank you for your attention.
Next, may I invite His Excellency Mr. Puspa Raj Kadel, Vice Chairman of the National Planning Commission, Nepal, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. I'm sorry, Excellency, we cannot hear you.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Under Secretary General and High Representative for OES RLLS, Chairman of the Committee on Development Policy, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Let me begin by thanking the ESCAP for convening this very important meeting of the special body of LDCs, LLDCs, and PIDs. We are holding this meeting at the crucial time when the world is struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to the adverse effect of the pandemic, many LDCs, including Nepal, are facing new challenges posed by this virus. We know that before COVID-19 pandemic, the LDCs of the Asia Pacific had made significant progress in implementing the IPOA. Our steady economic growth helped them to meet internationally agreed development goals, including the SDGs. 3 Asia Pacific countries, namely the Maldives, Samoa, and Vanuatu, graduated from the LDC status before 2020, with many others becoming eligible for graduation. Nepal had been a member of LDC since the introduction of this category in 1971. It has thrice fulfilled 2 of the 3 graduation criteria, with Human Assets Index and Economic Vulnerability Index in 2015, 2018, and 2021. This year, Nepal is recommended for graduation with a preparatory period of 5 years. Nepal has now started preparing a strategy for a smooth, irreversible, and sustainable graduation with diversified options for financing as well as utilizing trade measures to bolster the readiness of the business sector for competitive trade. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all sectors, including health, trade, tourism, transport, education, agriculture, and manufacturing sectors, among others. The economic growth has shrunken, and revenue growth rate and capital expenditure have also reduced significantly, in addition to other far-reaching adverse impacts. The government has concentrated its efforts towards controlling and mitigating the pandemic through appropriate policy measures and program interventions. The ongoing budget has given high priority to save people's lives with a robust focus on reviving the resilient economy and enhancing social welfare programs. Excellencies, at this critical juncture of time, the integrated approach of LDCs, LLDCs, and PIDS can play a pivotal role in promoting economic growth, diversifying trade, as well as transforming structural barriers and addressing multidimensional poverty. Most of the LDCs suffer from lack of competitiveness, which limits the capacity of wealth accumulation, investment, and productivity-driven growth. Therefore, a strategy for increasing the competitiveness and economic diversification, along with capital investment and promotion of advanced technology, is crucial in enhancing their capacity. The government of Nepal has focused on improving quality healthcare services, protecting the lives of the people, and reviving the economy, including the education sector, to reduce the adverse effects of the pandemic. Other areas, including agriculture, trade, science and technology, private sector development, human and social development, are also vital. Similarly, mobilizing financial resources for development and capacity building is extremely important. At a time of crisis like this, the role of development partners has become more crucial. International cooperation, including availability and accessibility of COVID-19 vaccines, financial support, as well as debt relief measures, are crucial for LDCs, LLDCs, and PIDS. The support measures should focus on increasing the social and economic resilience of the vulnerable economies. Excellencies, before concluding, I wish to stress that this is a time of great challenges and opportunities. I urge all countries in this region to join hands together to save the lives of our people, planet, and the future of humanity. I thank you all.
Next, may I invite Her Excellency, Ms. Adalgisa Magno, Minister of Foreign Affairs and External Trade, Timor-Leste, to deliver her statement. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Executive Secretary of UN ESCAP, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, it is an honor to address this special body on least developed, landlocked, developing, and Pacific Island developing countries during the 77th session of UN ESCAP. In my intervention, I will address three main issues. First, Timor-Leste progress in the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action. Second, Timor-Leste's preparation for the graduation from the LDCs category. And third, the recommendation to ESCAP and development partners to address the challenges faced by Timor-Leste as LDCs and SEADs. Firstly, on Timor-Leste's progress in the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action. Like many other countries in general, and especially LDCs, LLDCs, and SEADs, it is imperative to highlight that Timor-Leste faces a number of challenges in the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action. The most significant one is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in an economic and social predicament for Timor-Leste, affecting the country's revenue, economic growth, and increasing the unemployment rate. This challenge is prevalent in Timor-Leste and other Asia-Pacific LDCs and SEADs due to their high dependency on the oil and gas industry, which value and price decline sharply because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, The 5th United Nations Conference of LDCs in 2022 must include in its discussion the obstacles that hamper the implementation of the Istanbul Programme of Action, achieving the SDGs by 2030, and overcoming the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, the Timor-Leste preparation for graduation from the LDCs category. Graduation from the LDC status is the desired goal of the government of Timor-Leste. However, in the 2021 triennial review, Timor-Leste has respectfully requested the CDP to defer consideration of its graduation to the next triennial review in 2024. This was done because of the challenging circumstances the country facing, arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, the need to concentrate the economic diversification plan into actionable programs and activities to address its economic vulnerability and its human capacity constraints. During the meeting, Timor-Leste also requests the CDP to consider in its recommendation the importance of sustainability of graduation. Timor-Leste appreciates that the CDP took into account the position and recommendation from Timor-Leste during the triennial review and defer its decision on a recommendation on the graduation of Timor-Leste to the 2024 triennial review. Timor-Leste recognizes that it is crucial for economic diversification plan to promote forward and backward linkage between the commodity sector and the rest of the economy, to be able to diversify export baskets and to increase the spillover benefits of growth in the commodity sector. The overall policy guidance on the economic diversification plan of Timor-Leste has identified 3 sectors that need to be developed: agriculture and fisheries, tourism, and manufacturing. In this regard, the Council of Ministers of Timor-Leste has given the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation the mandates to coordinate a task force to develop Timor-Leste's smooth transition strategy for graduation, which put economic diversification at its center. Thirdly, on recommendation to ESCAP and development partners to address the challenges faced by Timor-Leste as LDC and SEADS. I firmly believe that our strength, like a chain, is measured by the weakest link. Therefore, I would like to call on the international community to strengthening and expanding international support measures to LDCs, LLDCs, and SEADS, particularly during this challenging time when many LDC, LLDC, and SEADS have to recover and build back from the impact of COVID-19 and to build resilience to prevent future shocks. In the specific situation of Timor-Leste, I would like to call for a more detailed analysis of the consequences of graduation to support the preparation of a smooth transition strategy, and request ESCAP to provide Timor-Leste with technical and financial assistance to support the preparation of this strategy. The second, request ESCAP to consider enhancing support to Timor-Leste structural transformation and economic diversification through technical assistance and targeted capacity building programs. Madam Chair, thank you.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. Seve Pareñu, Minister of Finance of Tuvalu.
Talofa and greetings from sunny Tuvalu. I wish to acknowledge the purpose of the special body this year is to bring forth policy messages that are specific to Asia-Pacific LDCs, both graduating and recently graduated countries. Let me contribute by highlighting Tuvalu's progress in implementing the Istanbul Programme of Action, based on Tuvalu's latest progress report, and highlighting some key development challenges. Tuvalu remains vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. There is also an urgent need to mobilize financial resources for building resilience, as well as for climate change adaptation. Moreover, accessing development finance remains an uphill battle. With this in mind, LDC graduating may exacerbate Tuvalu's challenges, as upon graduation, there may be possible reduction of grants and concessional loans, and the withdrawal of preferential market access for exports and several other benefits. To this end, I wish to recognize document ESCAP/77/4, paragraph 63, which states that mitigating the adverse impacts of the pandemic will be particularly difficult for graduating countries that are facing the withdrawal of duty-free and quota-free exports and the cessation of access to certain concessional financing sources while focusing on their socio-economic recovery. I also recognize document ESCAP/77/4, paragraph 38, which refers to Tuvalu's Climate Change and Disaster Survival Fund Act of 2015 as one of the concrete efforts to address extreme vulnerability and to enhance the country's resilience. Let me turn to suggested actions for LDC's development partners and for ESCAP to address these challenges pertinent to Tuvalu. I wish to call on the international community for increased international assistance, both technical and financial, to continue building the resilience of Tuvalu, social protection activities for all, and expand investment in resilient infrastructure. Let me reinforce this message by acknowledging document ESCAP/77/4, which emphasizes the need for robust and comprehensive social protection systems, and the call for increased support to climate finance. I wish to further emphasize the importance of international community in strengthening and expanding international support measures for both graduating and graduated countries. This is especially important given the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and to build resilience in these countries to prevent future shocks. Let me call for a more detailed analysis of the consequences of graduation. Tuvalu's IPOA report, to prepare a smooth transition strategy and request ESCAP to provide Tuvalu with technical and financial assistance to support the preparation of the strategy. Lastly, I wish to reiterate the importance of an urgent need for building economic, social, and environmental resilience of small island LDCs, including graduating and graduated ones, and call for enhanced engagement and coordination of development partners. Thank you.
May I now invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. Mark Ati, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and External Trade of Vanuatu.
Honorable Chair, Excellency Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Amida Salsia Alisabana, Excellency Under Secretary General Ms. Fekita Moeloa Katoa Utoi Kamanu, Chair of the Committee on Development Policy, Mr. Jose Antonio Ocampo, Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to share with you today Vanuatu's LDC graduation journey and a few key takeaways that we could reflect on as we work together to support the graduating and graduate Asia Pacific LDC in navigating preparation for graduation, smooth transition beyond graduation towards sustainable development in the midst of recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We complete our smooth transition strategy in December 2019 and endorsed by the government in July 2020. Our development partners, particularly UNESCAP through its sub-regional office in Suva, UNDESA, UNTAD, EU, the government of Australia and New Zealand, have been very supportive towards the development of our smooth transition strategy and UNDESA and ESCAP with its implementation, and for that we are forever grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, Vanuatu has taken a bold step to graduate out of the LDC category on December 4, 2020, despite the Category 5 TCR role and in the midst of COVID-19. Our smooth transition strategy makes it very clear that the impact of losing international support measure will be minimal. However, we do know that the future ahead of us will remain challenging. In such a unique situation where business as usual cannot be the way forward, we lodge with the UN an LDC resolution seeking an extension of international support measure for an additional period of 5 years. The resolution has been adopted by the UN General Assembly, and now we have a window of opportunity to explore new export markets. Accessing development finance will, however, remain an uphill battle. Ladies and gentlemen, for the graduation LDCs, it is important that preparation for a smooth transition strategy is commenced earlier rather than later. We need the international community to strengthen and expand the international support measures both for graduating and graduated countries. This is especially important given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and to build resilience in these countries to prevent future shocks. Ladies and gentlemen, reviving economic growth in the aftermath of the pandemic will be a significant challenge for the Asian Pacific least developed countries. We need to build on valuable experience of the Istanbul Program of Action and develop smart program of action for LDCs for the next decade. I therefore support the policy priority for forward by this Commission to support graduating and graduated LDC for the next 10 years. I thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now open the floor for brief country interventions. And again, I would like to urge all speakers to please limit their interventions to just 2 minutes. 2 minutes, please. To start with, may I invite the conference room officer to play the video of His Excellency, Mr. John Usamate, Minister of Infrastructure and Meteorological Services, Fiji.
Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a global crisis, leading to the deepest global recession since the Second World War. This has not only placed enormous physical distress on the developing countries, but has reversed decades of development progress as well. This setback is quite evident within the Asian Pacific region, and in particular, the Pacific small island developing states, including Fiji. Economic recovery for Fiji and the Pacific will be prolonged as new variants of the virus emerge and as vaccines become a highly sought-after commodity. Given the global restrictions on movement, it is anticipated that for the tourism and the service sector, full recovery is years away. Thus, we will require highly concessional financing to maintain social protection and protect our vulnerable, to protect further backsliding on our development agenda. Global supply chains were halted by the pandemic and further exacerbate the shortage of foreign exchange and high procurement costs of foreign medical supplies and other commercial goods. This shortage of goods and the subsequent high cost of living is acutely felt in the Pacific. Our health systems deal with health challenges arising from climate-induced natural disasters and are stretched to capacity. It is these same health systems that are also responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although Fiji and the Pacific has taken proactive national responses to mitigate the impact of the pandemic and prevent community transmission, our global interconnectedness means that we are not immune to exposure to the pandemic. Vaccine equity is key to reopening our economies and eventual path to recovery. The ongoing climate crisis is wreaking havoc and devastation on our infrastructure connectivity. Road networks, jetties, and wharves that connect our islands have been damaged from increased rains and more frequent flooding associated with the rapid onset of climate change. This is a crisis within a crisis, as Pacific states must ensure that housing infrastructure, including homes, health and schools, are strengthened to be able to withstand stronger Category 5 winds. Chair, recovery, and not just recovery but a sustainable one, is one in which we must ensure progress, particularly in this last decade of sustainable development. Discussions at the 8th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, convened last month, has shown that the region is very much at risk of not fully realizing the 2030 agenda. This must change as we resolve to work together to recover sustainably as a region, leaving no one behind. It is important to have a forward-leaning look on an inclusive and broad-based economy, building on sustainable blue and green economic models, using nature-based technologies and solutions, and accelerating the move to net zero carbon emissions. The path to net zero should be a job-creating one. Hope prevails that with this crisis, a new and stronger frontier of multilateralism and international cooperation will be forged, ensuring that we all emerge from this crisis stronger and better prepared, and most importantly, together with no one left behind. I thank you, Chair.
Next, may I call on the Lao People's Democratic Republic to deliver its statement, to be followed by Pakistan. Lao, you have the floor. Sorry, Excellency, we cannot hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Excellency, distinguished delegates, at the outset, on behalf of the Lao delegation, I would like to express our appreciation to Executive Secretary of ESCAP for the presentation of the main findings of the Asia-Pacific countries with special needs development report 2021 and the High Representative for LDC, LLDC, and SAARC on the highlights of the recent progress, global progress on the implementation of the program of action of LDC, LLDC, and SAARC. My delegation concurs with the findings. However, let me share some of our views in this regard. Being both LDC and LLDC, the Lao-PDR disadvantages are multiple and challenges than other countries in the region. Over the past year, the government of the Lao-PDR has been putting great efforts to overcome those challenges by adopting strategies and vision that will transform itself from landlocked to landlinked country and better connectivity. As a result, high economic growth at the average of around 6% per year during the past years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic has enabled Lao-PDR to meet 2 out of 3 criteria for LDC graduation in 2018 and meet all 3 criteria at this year review by CDP. Nonetheless, given the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, it will be very challenging for my country to maintain continued high economic growth. The uncertainty is still lying ahead, dependent on the scope, severity, and prolong of the pandemic in the region and the world. Madam Chair, how to help those qualifying countries for LDC graduation in the region from falling short of the threshold or sliding back to LDC during the preparatory period, which is the CDP has granted 5 years instead of the normal 3 years to qualifying countries, required concerted efforts and assistance from international and global communities. In this regard, a smooth graduation strategy should be formulated for each qualifying country by taking into account the specific needs of this particular country. In addition, we have to strengthen the implementation of the IPOA and VPOA that have provided global cooperation framework on addressing the specific needs of the LDC, LDC, and SIT. And given the current context of COVID-19 pandemic, the most important and urgent needs are to address the issue of outbreak prevention and recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. My country support multilateral cooperation in addressing the global pandemic and support the COVAX facility for the access to vaccine for all countries. In this regard, my delegation would like to thank the friendly countries and international organizations for providing valuable assistance to my country, be medical equipment, medicine, and vaccine, and hopes to receive continued support. Madam Chair, allow me to conclude by stressing that graduating from LDC status is not an end in itself. The ultimate objective is to ensure the inclusive well-being of all people in the society so that we can meet the slogan of leaving no one behind, and we can all realize the international sustainable development goals. I thank you.
Thank you, Lau PDR. May I again remind that intervention should be limited to just 2 minutes. So our next speaker would be Pakistan, to be followed by China. Pakistan, you have the floor. May I call on Pakistan again, please? Please unmute.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We listened with great interest this important discussion under the agenda item 3. COVID-19 pandemic has impacted least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states in an unprecedented and disproportionate ways. These countries have also experienced serious setbacks in their progress towards achieving the SDGs. Despite the targets set by the Istanbul Programme of Action, the Vienna Programme of Action, and the Samoa Pathways, we note that the concerned countries are still vulnerable to economic shocks and natural hazards to a degree that few other countries and regions are. Helping tackle the development challenges faced by the LDCs, the LLDCs, and SIDS, and to strengthen their resilience should be a priority for the international community. Sustainable and resilient recovery for these countries can be made possible through the expansion, development, and full utilization of their productive capacities. This includes special emphasis on infrastructure, trade and transport facilitation, technology development and technology transfer, and institutional development at all levels of governance. This also entails continued capacity building support by the international community to accelerate the recovery efforts of these countries. Pakistan will also continue to contribute in this regard. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Pakistan. The next speaker is China, to be followed by Thailand. China, you have the floor.
主席、女士、女士们、先生们，最不发达国家、内陆国和太平洋岛屿发展中国家面临特殊的发展困难。亚太各国应当加强区域合作，帮助特殊处境国家应对应其挑战，早日实现疫后重建，实现不让任何人掉队的承诺。首先，应该推进区域合作，促进贸易与投资，深化互联互通伙伴关系，确保全球产业链、供应链的顺畅稳定，创造有利于各国，特别是特殊处境国家经济社会复苏的国际发展环境。第二，应该加强国际抗疫合作，向特殊处境国家提供医疗卫生等综合性支持，确保疫苗在发展中国家的可及性和可负担性，促进疫苗的公平分配。第三，应该加强南北合作，发达国家应切实履行官方发展援助承诺，应该加强南南合作和三方合作，促进特殊处境国家经济社会发展。第四， 应该加强气候变化和防灾减灾国际合作，帮助特殊处境国家应对气候和环境挑战，实现绿色和韧性复苏。主席先生，作为最大的发展中国家，中国一直坚定支持特殊处境国家的发展，在南南合作框架下与特殊处境国家开展各领域合作。疫情发生以来，中方全力支持特殊处境国家抗疫，全面落实 G20 暂缓最贫困国家债务偿付倡议，并提供了医疗物资及疫苗的援助。女士们、先生们，中方愿同 ESCAP 各成员及秘书处加强合作，促进特殊处境国家的可持续发展。谢谢主席女士。
Thank you, China. The next speaker is Thailand, to be followed by Australia. Thailand, you have the floor. I'm sorry, we cannot hear. Please unmute yourself. There.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, the COVID-19 crisis continues to pose significant socio-economic impacts across the region, as well as on our progress in advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. These effects have not manifested themselves equally across our region. Those that have been disproportionately affected include the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. Thailand commends the progress made in implementing the Istanbul Programme of Action and the graduation of 3 Asia-Pacific countries from LDC status in the past decade. Most importantly, we welcome Vanuatu's graduation last year, despite the challenges posed by COVID-19. Thailand reaffirms that only international cooperation and multi-stakeholder partnerships can truly bring about a comprehensive recovery. We must ensure that countries in special situations have access to the technology and tools needed to foster recovery and sustainable development in the post-COVID era. We are committed to cooperating with the LDCs and other countries with special situations in creating the transformative change required for sustainable development. The sufficiency economy philosophy, Thailand's homegrown development approach, promotes human-centered development that balances inclusive growth with environmental conservation while applying local wisdom and knowledge. LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS make up the majority of the countries with which Thailand has ongoing SEP-related projects. They are a key strategic priority and integral partners in Thailand's international cooperation activities to achieve the SDGs. Thailand has and will continue to share our experiences on the application of homegrown and locally driven development approaches. We commit ourselves to work with all countries and stakeholders to support a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient recovery from COVID-19 that takes into account the needs and disproportionate effects felt by the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thailand. Let me just give notice, please, that by 12:30, there will be no more interpretation services, but we could still proceed. The next speaker is Australia, to be followed by Mongolia. Australia, you have the floor.
Yeah.
Yes, please proceed.
Developing countries, particularly least developed countries and small island developing states, have been hit hard by COVID-19. They are significantly constrained in addressing this daunting health and economic crisis. For example, according to the World Bank in April 2021, all Pacific Island countries except Nauru fell into recession in 2020 due to border closures and related trade disruptions. The impact of the pandemic has been exacerbated also by severe natural disasters. Australia is working closely with our LDC and SIDS partners, including in the Pacific, as they tackle the many challenges emanating from the crisis. In the current context, we encourage the UN and other specialised agencies to take a pragmatic approach to graduation. For example, reforming assessments to go beyond the narrow measure of GNI and better reflect the multidimensional vulnerability facing some countries, particularly Pacific SIDS. considering pausing graduation in some instances until the long-term impacts of COVID-19 are clearer, and ensuring graduating countries receive support to transition successfully from LDC status. For example, Solomon Islands has been recommended to graduate in 2024. Australia's priority is to help partners to procure and deliver COVID-19 vaccines that are safe and effective in adherence with calls for vaccine equity. We have committed $623 million over 3 years to help countries in the Pacific and Southeast Asia, as well as $80 million to the COVAX facility's advanced market commitment. Our support includes technical assistance, development of immunisation policies, and advice on public messaging. We are working closely with other countries and organisations that are providing vaccine support to many LDCs and SIDS to coordinate and amplify our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. The next speaker is Mongolia. Mongolia, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. Madam Executive Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, now all Asia Pacific have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, both socially and economically, experiencing considerable reductions in economic growth, growing unemployment, a sharp decline of international trade, disruptions in the supply chain, and complete halt in the travel industry. The importance of infrastructure development and linkage to main international trade routes are high on the agenda for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and Pacific Island developing countries, especially in these challenging times. Therefore, the implementation of the key policy documents such as the 2030 Agenda for the SDGs and the action-oriented programs targeting the countries with specific needs are undermined, and these countries need extra efforts to achieve their targets. They face specific and increasing challenges due to the specifics, including remoteness from main export markets, limited landmass, small population and economies, and high vulnerability to external environmental and economic shocks. These challenges, coupled with the pandemic's difficulties, continue to pose an enduring impact on the resilience of the countries and deteriorate the prospects of realizing SDG goals and the programs. Being the only landlocked nation in Northeast Asia, Mongolia attaches great importance to international trade facilitation mechanisms and regional transport connectivity. We believe that international agreements, including the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade facilitation and intergovernmental agreement on dry ports, would increase the cost effectiveness of trade transactions for all countries. Mongolia also attaches great importance to the ESCAP initiatives on the Trans-Asian Railway Network and Asian Highway Network. Thus, to support the economic recovery of the regional countries, we call for the Commission to put even more effort into expanding the membership to these international legal documents. Finally, I would like to emphasize that Mongolia, being one of the pioneers in establishing and leading a group of landlocked developing countries, has been successfully operating the International Think Tank for Landlocked Developing Countries since 2009. Over the past decade, the International Think Tank has been working to support landlocked developing countries to tackle persisting and emerging challenges by providing evidence-based advisory services and providing landlocked developing countries with a platform for knowledge sharing support, for collaboration and global engagement. Thank you.
This concludes our discussions under Agenda Item 3. Just before we proceed with the break, may I call on the Secretary of the Commission to make an announcement.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, a reminder that during the break there will be a number of side events hosted by member states and partner organizations. The first side event that started 5 minutes ago is linking the achievement of SDG 1 and SDG 2 to Build Back Better, poverty alleviation through sustainable agricultural development and rural revitalization. organized by the Government of China, the International Poverty Reduction Center in China, and the Center for Sustainable Agriculture Mechanization, CSAM. Starting in 10 minutes, we have another two side events: debt relief in the aftermath of the pandemic, how can regional dialogue help, organized by the government of Pakistan, and moving past coal in the Asia-Pacific region, organized by the government of Bangladesh. All registered participants will have received the link to connect, and these events are open to all participants. The link is also available on the Commission website under side events. We look forward to your participation in these side events. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. We will now break and reconvene this afternoon at 1400 hours, Bangkok time sharp, to pursue discussions under Agenda Item 4. The meeting is adjourned.